Sometimes the line between good and evil is very thin, especially if a person sees this world differently than most. In this case, close people who provide support and understanding are very helpful. Unfortunately, in some cases this may not be enough. Lauren Stewart was born on January 9th, 1973 in Michigan, USA. She spent most of her life here. The girl grew up in a large, friendly family, so she did not experience any difficulties in communication. But she only had warm relationships with some of her siblings. Lauren's life was hardly easy. From an early age, she faced severe shocks. One of them was the death of her mother, who died when Lauren was still in school. She was able to distract herself from the mourning. Only her passion for studies and religion, and her focus on success, helped her achieve a lot. Among the woman's achievements were acting and modeling. She moved to the tiny town of Kiga Harbor, population about 2,000. It was a quiet town with picturesque beauty. It was perfect for a quiet life. It was here that she met the love of her life, Daniel Stewart. When they first met, the young man was also working hard at his career, studying and working. He always believed that work and education were the keys to success. Daniel later worked at the University of Michigan, became a programmer, and earned a decent living. In addition to their career aspirations, both were devoted Christians and regularly attended their local church. The couple had 2 children, a son, Stephen, and a daughter, Bethany. Both followed in their parents' footsteps, focusing on career and education. But there were serious problems. The young man was involved in computers and needed an education, so his parents wanted to send him to college. The daughter wanted to get a degree in graphic design, especially since they had the financial means to do so. Unfortunately, these plans ran counter to the opinion of the local church. Strict requirements included a ban on studying in higher education institutions. In a small community, it was difficult to hide something like that, so the Stewarts immediately attracted unwanted attention when their children entered the university. At the same time, both parents were against having someone else's view imposed on them. This led to problems due to sidelong glances from church parishioners. Back in 2011, Daniel decided to stop attending the church. However, the interference and pressure from church members only increased, as the demands included a complete ban on parishioners communicating with any apostates. Because of her wayward husband, Lauren was also expelled from the church and could no longer attend it. However, the parents remained confident that higher education degrees would be much more valuable for their children than religion. After several unpleasant incidents, Dan decided not to comply with the church's policy. Naturally, this was perceived negatively by the local community. After leaving the church, the couple faced disapproval from people with whom they had previously maintained neighborly relations. Even when going to the store, Lauren often heard disapproving comments about herself. Years passed, but even time did not change this situation. The Stewart family was still looked at askance by many of their neighbors, and almost no one talked to them. And they lacked communication. To fill the void, the woman began going to the gym. Thanks to her appearance, Lauren was even able to get a job as a fitness instructor in a neighboring town. However, behind her beautiful appearance and apparent cheerfulness, something more disturbing was hidden. Stewart and were going through hard times. In addition to the difficulties with the immediate environment, the couple was faced with financial problems. Despite all this, Lauren still continued to demonstrate to everyone around her that everything was fine. No one suspected that in reality, everything was different. On February 15th, 2018, Lauren texted her cousin. She confessed that she had decided to take her husband and children with her so that they would not have to bear the brunt of her selfish act. After receiving the text, her cousin tried to understand what it all meant and what was going on. The woman had seen her cousin become increasingly withdrawn and unsociable in recent months. However, it was not entirely clear what Lauren meant. The next day, February 16th, 2018, her cousin went to the Stewart's house. She wanted to make sure everything was okay, to discuss the situation, but no one answered the door. The house was suspiciously quiet, even though the family cars were parked in the driveway, which meant that family members should be home, and yet no one answered the door. At first, the sister waited, thinking that they might all just be out for a walk around the neighborhood, but she quickly discarded that thought. This behavior was not typical for the Stewart family, and it was too early in the morning to be heading out without a car. A concerned relative called the police to check on the family. Keega Harbor Police received a call around 10 a.m. When they arrived at the couple's home, no one answered the door. Lauren's worried cousin and friend were already gathered at the entrance. It was a quiet suburb where everyone knew each other well. The woman's relatives immediately pointed out several oddities. First, not only Lauren and Dan's car was parked in the driveway, but also their eldest son's. At that time, the young man lived separately from his family in another part of the city. The fact that he was in this house, but at the same time did not respond to knocks and calls, looked strange. Another suspicious detail was that the family dog was silent, although the animal also always greeted guests. The police listened, that it was too quiet inside, and decided to break down the door. It was suspected that the family might have been the victim of an attack. The patrol officers carefully examined the rooms and first discovered a dog in the bathroom. The animal had received a gunshot wound, but did not die immediately. Bloody footprints on the floor indicated this. The dog crawled around the bathroom for a while until it bled. The criminal could still be in the house, so the police advanced with their guns drawn and called for backup. When several more crews arrived, the inspection continued. Now they went up to the second floor. They found a dead girl in the bedroom. Bethany, 24, was shot in the head and was asleep when the attack occurred. The attacker found her in bed. The girl didn't even wake up when he opened the door. The pillow placed on her face and the position of her body indicated this. It all happened too quickly. The killer used an object to muffle the sound of the gunshot. Bethany died instantly, but apparently she was not the first person to be shot. Police officers moved on and found Lauren's son also unresponsive. Stephen, 27, was still in street clothes, as if he had just arrived to visit his family. The young man was shot in the kitchen with a bullet to the head from behind. It looked as if he had sat down at the dinner table and the killer had suddenly shot him in the back of the head. He died instantly. Police continued to search the house and found 2 more bodies. Daniel, 47, was lying near a couch in the basement. He was found in a position as if he was just sitting on the couch watching TV, but he managed to react to the killer's appearance. One of his hands remained in his pants pocket, and the other was jerked out of the other pocket so quickly that it tore off the lining. Apparently, he managed to make one single movement to resist the killer, and then died. The man also received a bullet to the head, which instantly took his life. Not far from the body of the head of the family, at the base of the stairs to the basement, 45-year-old Lauren was found in a pool of blood. Next to the woman lay a Glob pistol. She herself died from a gunshot wound. The bullet hit her head and was fired right between the eyes. Forensic experts carefully examined the entire house, but found no traces of anyone outside, nor any signs of a break-in. It all looked strange, as if the criminal was well acquainted with all the members of the family, so he was calmly let in. Several oddities were revealed here at once. Firstly, all the photographs depicting the family members were turned upside down. The photos were found in Dan's office, as well as in the couple's bedroom and living room, which could indicate a personal motive for the crime. However, no one had heard of any potentially dangerous people in the couple's immediate circle, prone to violence or with a criminal past. The Stewarts had no problems that could lead to the murder of 4 people at once. Detectives spoke to the family members who had called the police. They also did not know who might have had a conflict with Lauren or Dan, but they did talk about their strained relationships with the local community after leaving the church. This was the first suggestion that the murder might have been religiously motivated. Perhaps some religious fanatic was so offended by the couple's disdain for the local church that he decided to get even with them. A random attack was ruled out, at the very least, because there were no signs of a break-in. At the same time, the nearest neighbors were questioned. One of them said he heard several bangs the day before police discovered the bloody massacre in the house. However, he did not perceive it as a shooting. The neighbor thought someone was simply slamming a door. He estimated that there were 6 or 7 blows, all within a relatively short time span. This was consistent with the number of bullets needed to kill the Stewarts. There was disturbing evidence found inside the house. There was a note left on the kitchen table addressed to the medical examiner, and another one for Lauren's family. The first one stated that Lauren Stewart had done all this. The woman admitted that she wanted to voluntarily end her life, and at the same time did not want to leave her loved ones to their fate, with the feeling of guilt that they would feel after her actions. The woman wrote to her loved ones that the reason for her voluntary end of life was her rejection of God's love. She also explained that she killed her entire family so that her death would not darken their lives. The woman was sure that now they would all be resurrected after death. Therefore, she saw her act as salvation. Naturally, such an excuse seemed very strange, so the detectives initially suspected a setup. Communicating with the couple's closest circle, the detectives had already found out that they were experiencing a crisis in their relations with the locals. The biggest problem was persecution from the church. They had been members for a while and left years before the tragedy. Even though the woman had been excommunicated 5 years before the tragedy, she apparently still had feelings about it. Among the most probable versions was voluntary suicide, before which Lauren dealt with everyone else. Naturally, all this had to be proven materially, so an investigation was launched to finally confirm this version. Detectives talked a lot with neighbors, local residents, and also with members of the Stewart family. The most valuable information was gleaned from the woman's computer and cell phone. On the evening of February 6, 2018, 9 days before the tragedy, Lauren recorded a 2-minute video in which she revealed her plan. The woman explained that she was going to commit suicide, but her plan had nothing to do with her family. She wanted to get rid of her problems in this way, said that she could not live like this anymore, and did not want to be a burden to her loved ones. The very next day, February 7th, at about 1 p.m., Lauren recorded another video lasting several minutes, in which the woman described her life, calling it a path of destruction. In addition, Lauren devoted most of the video to describing scenes of rape in childhood, which she experienced at the hands of a close relative. Now the woman insisted that the shock she had experienced was one of the impetuses for her voluntary end of life. However, these recordings did not indicate that she wanted to kill her husband and children, or even the dog. In addition to the video, viewing the browser provided valuable information. In her free time and alone, Lauren scoured the internet for ways to kill herself. She took a particular interest in firearms, a Glock pistol. The model was identical to the one found near the body. Lauren studied the principles of handling weapons, prepared for voluntary suicide. Ballistic examination showed that all the victims were shot with this gun. It is noteworthy that the heroine of the story paid special attention to the method that would allow one bullet to kill herself. The particular shot to the head was not an accident, but a tried and tested method she had read about online. In reconstructing the chronology of events, law enforcement officials paid close attention to the messages Lauren sent on that fateful day, February 15. The first of them, at 9:24 a.m. was addressed to her husband's boss. She wrote that Daniel had been in an accident and died. The woman did not go into details, writing that the doctors at the clinic where Dan died would tell him everything. Later, the police talked to the manager. The man confirmed that he had received the message and tried to get more information from Lauren, but she did not respond to subsequent messages. His calls were ignored by both Daniel and his wife. They were probably all dead at this point. The employer believed that he would get details when a doctor at a local hospital told him what had happened to his employee. When the manager contacted the hospital, they also gave him no useful information. When they told him that Daniel Stewart had not been admitted to the medical center, he was confused, thinking that the man was in another hospital and was forced to simply wait for news. The exact time Lauren's family members died was unknown. Detectives speculated that Lauren had shot everyone before notifying her husband's boss. This was confirmed by a neighbor who heard a series of bangs around 9 a.m., and the SMS to the manager came at 9:24. Obviously, after that, the woman hesitated. Probably she could not decide to voluntarily leave this life for a long time. On the same day at 17:07, she wrote to her cousin that she had taken the path of evil. Lauren said that she had taken her husband and children, and now she was going to leave herself. The cousin also tried to understand what exactly the woman meant, but never received an answer from her. All calls and messages were ignored. It still remained a mystery what prompted Lauren to decide to commit a terrible crime and do something like this. According to a neighbor who heard the second series of bangs, the strange noise came from the Stewarts' home between 9 and 10 p.m. on February 15th. It was during this time that Lauren allegedly killed the dog and shot herself in the head. She spent most of the day surrounded by the bodies of her loved ones, all of whom she had shot. People familiar with the family had plenty of time to react, but Lauren's cries for help were ignored. Only her cousin was not indifferent. She still could not understand what was happening, but she was not able to come to Lauren's house right away. She tried to contact Lauren again at 1 a.m., but still did not receive an answer. It wasn't until the next morning that she arrived at the Stewarts' home with her friend Lauren. The order in which the family members died also remained a mystery. The death of 27-year-old Stephen raised the most questions, as he didn't live with his parents and had to be lured into the house to be shot. Were the others already dead at this point? Detectives theorized that Lauren's husband was the first to die. Daniel was the strongest of them all, so he could have stopped his wife. She likely eliminated him first as the main threat. It was possible to find out how the woman lured her 27-year-old son home. The last time she contacted him was on Valentine's Day, asking if he was going to visit. He was supposed to arrive on the morning of February 15th. While inspecting the house where the tragedy occurred, the police found a refrigerator full of food, as well as various stickers with notes about planned activities for the future, mentions. Everything indicated that the family led a normal life. No one expected something like this to happen. No one except Lauren. Apparently, she deliberately acted as if everything was normal in order to deceive everyone and kill them. No one could expect her to be deadly. Lauren's family members, as well as neighbors, described the couple as rather strange and unsociable. Little was known about them to outsiders, except that they left the church. Daniel left the church about 10 years ago, and the rest were excommunicated in 2013. Lauren had 11 siblings who got along well with each other, but all said she herself had stopped communicating with her family. The woman had become very distant from her family, so much so that her father had not spoken to her for many years. When they tried to find out from the man what kind of violence his daughter had been subjected to in her youth, he had difficulty answering. No records of rape could be found. Either they had not been reported to law enforcement, or all of this was the fruit of the woman's sick imagination. Lauren's father believed that his daughter had changed greatly after her mother's death. She took the loss of a loved one more painfully than anyone else. At the same time, the whole family dealt with it as best they could and did not seek help from specialists. Detectives believe it was at this point that Lauren's mental health took a serious hit. The trauma only worsened in the years that followed. Other family members said Lauren had suffered from depression for years, including postpartum depression. The natural distancing from the church had a negative effect on the woman. Despite her decision to leave religion, Lauren sometimes said she had doubts about it. For many years, she found solace in her faith, and after excommunication, she was unable to fill the void. In the last months before the murder, the woman became much more religious. Friends noted that she often lost her temper over trifles and seemed detached. Lauren's father believed that she was not the only one to blame for what happened. The man claimed that Lauren's husband, Daniel, never cared for his daughter as much as he should have, but he did his best to drive the family apart. After meeting Dan, he became a catalyst for increasing the distance between her and her siblings. Tension developed between them that only grew stronger over the years. One of Lauren's sisters said she had not spoken to her for 6 years. She also believed that Dan was the one who alienated his wife from the family. In her opinion, the man also suffered from mental illness, and there was some kind of exchange between the spouses. The woman believed that Lauren and Dan fueled each other's mental problems. At the same time, neither of them sought professional help. Both preferred to cope on their own. However, not everyone supported such views. Some described Daniel as a very talented and positive person. He did his work with great pleasure. He repeatedly stated that through his work, he makes the lives of others better. One of the family's mutual friends met the Stewarts shortly before the tragedy. The friend said that they had always loved each other very much, even idolized each other. Both Dan and Lauren knew very well that they were prone to depression, so they took care of each other. Daniel's family was more positive about the couple. They didn't deny the problems the man and woman were struggling with, but they were much more relaxed about them. Friends of the family believed that speaking out against the church played a significant role in the matter. When Lauren became an apostate, she faced criticism from her local community. This continued with varying intensity for the 10 years after Daniel left the church. The Stewarts were considered apostates by their neighbors and the inner circle of people who lived in the town. Even when law enforcement interacted with them, there was a sense of disregard for their lives. Those closest to the couple who had contact described the behavior of the local community after they left the church as inappropriate. They believed their actions contributed to the tragic outcome. Because of the local church's strict doctrine, other parishioners were not even allowed to communicate with them. Because of this, the Stewarts experienced all kinds of pressure. Against this background, one of the family's friends even came to the church and openly expressed her indignation, accusing the leaders of the death of an entire family. This was supported by a 2-minute video Lauren recorded shortly before her death and murders, in which she laid out the extent of her despair at being ostracized. She was in such psychological pain that she believed that taking her own life was the only way to cope. Analyzing the couple's final years, experts concluded that there were several clear signs that suggested a tendency to take her own life. Lauren repeatedly discussed her desire to die. Some witnesses pointed out her feelings of anxiety and hopelessness. Her notes described her as a burden to her loved ones, in pain and isolation. She had mood swings that family members described. From witnesses and Lauren Stewart's own writings, law enforcement officials uncovered a picture of a serious illness that had never received the attention it deserved from experts. The cousin repeatedly suggested going to a specialist, as she saw how much Lauren was suffering, but it did not affect anything. She refused help. Experts came to the conclusion that Lauren had been experiencing symptoms of severe depression and inappropriate behavior for many years. All these symptoms increased many times shortly before the tragedy. The woman remained as religious as ever. She created her own version of God, faith, good, and evil. Lauren gradually and irreversibly sank into her own world. All this only intensified her depressive state. Detectives made sure that the woman did not receive qualified help, did not take any prescription drugs. Toxicology tests showed no alcohol in the blood of any of the victims, but Dan, Lauren, and their son all had traces of weed. However, police were skeptical that it could have affected the condition of all these people and led to such a tragedy. After completing the investigation, detectives concluded that the family's death was caused by a combination of loneliness and isolation, loss of connection with the outside world, loved ones, alienation from the church, and childhood psychological trauma. Lauren did not receive the help she needed, and all this forced her to commit suicide. At the same time, an alternative view of good and evil forced her to take all her relatives with her. The testimony of some relatives also confirmed this version. One of the victim's sisters said she wasn't even surprised to hear about what she had done. Experts say common signs of suicide include discussing the desire to die, feelings of anxiety and hopelessness, feeling like a burden, feeling trapped or in constant pain, feeling detached from others, experiencing mood swings, including anger and recklessness, and abnormal sleep patterns. Most suicides involve. This file is longer than 30 minutes. Go unlimited at turboscribe.ai to transcribe files up to 10 hours long. Most suicides involve a complex mix of these factors, and in Lauren's case, every sign was present long before the events of February 15th, 2018. Friends and relatives later admitted that they had noticed the warning signs, but underestimated their seriousness, assuming she would eventually snap out of it. Unfortunately, no one realized how far she had already gone in her mind. The Stewarts' deaths left the small community of Kega Harbor in shock. For weeks, the town struggled to reconcile the image of a smiling, devoted wife and mother with the horrifying reality of what she had done. The tragedy sparked difficult conversations about mental health, the dangers of social isolation, and the stigma surrounding leaving a close-knit religious group. In the end, investigators concluded that no single person or event could be blamed entirely. Rather, it was the tragic outcome of years of emotional suffering, untreated depression, community rejection, and Lauren's own distorted beliefs. Today, the Stewart family is remembered not only for the heartbreaking way their lives ended, but also as a reminder of the urgent need for compassion, open dialogue, and mental health support before it's too late. In the quiet streets of Kega Harbor, a family's laughter was silenced forever. This is more than just a story. It is a lesson about love, faith, and the invisible battles we fight inside. If this story touched your heart, remember, there are countless untold tragedies around us. Together, we can share them, and perhaps change something, even if it's just a little. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that truly matters. In our next episode, we'll uncover another real story, a story that will leave you speechless. Until then, stay safe and take care of each other.